Many hours can be seemingly wasted trying to drive home the same point over and over and over again. It can be frustrating and maddening for us, especially when the problem persists, whether it be days or weeks later, or even just a few hours. Why do we have the same problems with things we know we've covered in depth before? More importantly, how do we overcome this once and for all? Stay tuned and I'll share a method that I believe saved me a lot of time and a lot of frustration.
Running a service business can be hard. It is not unusual for business owners in industries like contracting, home repair, auto repair, business-to-business services like janitorial, IT and accounting, and many others to feel overwhelmed by all the priorities facing them at any given time. Between addressing the needs of the customers, managing the employees, figuring out the financials, and getting processes in place, feeling like you're making significant progress on your business journey can be difficult. Welcome to Service Industry Success, hosted by Brian Harding. Each week, Brian will look at real-world strategies for building the business you are dreaming of, while also sharing tactics to get through some of the most frustrating parts of business ownership with a lot more ease. Let's get started.
So if you listened to this podcast before, you've heard me tell the story of my boss, Bill. When I was a supervisor, new supervisor, he was the operations manager. He was the guy I reported to. I thought he was this larger-than-life figure. I really thought he was just a very talented and a guy who I just thought knew it all. I just thought he was the guy that knew it all. And again, I was blessed to have him and my other mentor, Mike, who came along, who had a much more significant role in my development personally and professionally. Dave is another guy who I was blessed to be, taught by. But one time, Bill, the operations manager I reported to when I was a supervisor, was really getting frustrated that my team, I had about 36 employees this time. I was 24 years old, so I was new. I didn't have a lot of skills. I didn't know what I was doing, frankly, most of the time. I just thought I should walk around and telling people what to do. And because of my rank and title, they were supposed to do it. And I'm not exaggerating that. I really thought that's how it worked. When I was 24, I didn't know any better. And one day he said to me, if all we need was somebody to stand in front of the people and tell them things, what do we need you for? And you've probably heard me tell this story before. And I didn't have an answer because there is no answer. That's not what leadership is. Leadership is not standing in front of people telling them things. And when he put it that way, I really had to kind of look at myself and reflect and go, well, what am I doing here? I mean, what am I doing? What am I thinking is going to happen? Am I just walking around this warehouse with all these employees doing stuff, and I just go bark orders at them and expect things to happen? And his point was a solid point, which was we need leadership here, not a person who can just recite things to these people. He's like, I can do that. I don't need you to be here to do that. If I'm just going to stand in front of them once a day or a few times a day and go tell them things, I can do that, and it wouldn't be a big deal. And that really stuck out to me. That was, that was 26 years ago. And that moment still, I can still feel the knot in my stomach that I felt at the time when he said that. So I think that's an important thing to start off with. Is this is kind of where I'm coming from. Is this hit me hard, and it was one of those moments where I really had to kind of come to grips with the fact that I didn't have any skills and I had to learn some things. The second thing I want to say to kind of frame what I'm going to talk about here is I have 13 or so kind of rules or guidelines for training. One day we might get into that in the podcast. We cover a lot of it, in kind of ancillary ways. So, but one of my first probably my first rule of training, teaching, and getting people on board with things is this. If telling them worked, I probably wouldn't be having this conversation. If I've already told them one or two or three times and I'm having this conversation, then telling them definitely does not work. Because the reason I'm telling them again is because we made a mistake last week or yesterday or a month ago, or we got this customer complaint. There's a reason I'm telling this thing again. And maybe we're not efficient enough. We're not productive enough. We're not hitting our goals or expectations, or we're not providing the experience we want. There's lots of reasons we do this. The culture is not going well, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what the topic is. If telling them worked, I probably wouldn't have to, or I wouldn't be having this conversation now where I feel like I need to tell them again. And again, especially if I've already done that once, that would be proof that telling them didn't work. Right. So an example of this would be I've talked about before, like one of the rules we had in servicing our clients is we had 5 points of communication with every customer on every job. And I won't go into detail what those were, but the basics, like when we get there, we're on the way. When we get there, diagnosis. If we have to leave the job and come back the next day, or if we're finished, like there was 5 points of communication. And in our industry, this was not a common thing for employees to have to do. And so, where they started with this, when we first rolled this out, they were skeptical. They were resistant. They saw this as a chore or a hassle. They probably thought, and I can almost confirm that this was something I was maybe making too big a deal out of than what was reality. Like it wasn't really that big of a deal. Yeah, that's what he wants, but that's like his pet thing. It's not that big of a deal. He's blowing this out of proportion. Now, they wouldn't say that in the meeting. When I would talk about the 5 points of communication, they would all nod and smile and, yep, we got a boss, thanks, and head out the door and then not do it. And and this was where the frustration was I'm sitting here watching you nod and smile as I'm saying this. You're agreeing this is a thing we need to do, and then you're not doing it. And I can't even tell you for how long we had conversations where I would just stand in front of people and tell them, like, this is a thing that needs to happen. And then they wouldn't do it. And then I would get frustrated. We would get the customer complaints. We'd have situations where people didn't, we didn't know what we were supposed to do, or where things were on a job or whatever. The communication didn't happen, whatever. And where they finished was, fast forward, a year or two from there, they're consistently making the calls. They do the 5 points of communication. They're fully fluent. They were fully fluent in what we did and why we did it. Like they knew exactly what was expected and exactly why we did it, and the benefit to them and to the customer and to the company. They knew all that stuff. And so at that point, it required very little oversight on my part to make sure we were doing this thing well. So what made that change happen? That's the key question we probably want to know, right? Glad you asked. More on that in a second. First, I'd like to tell you how you can join my group, Business Tips. This is a place where you can ask any question you have about improving your business, your growth, your team, your processes, or your profitability. This group is for anyone who has a team of employees they lead, not just for business owners. We meet twice a month on a recorded Zoom call, and there are lots of other benefits as well. Just go to joinbusinesstips.com to see what else is included. It's less than $100 a month, no contracts, no commitment. That's joinbusinesstips.com to check it out. So we spend so much time trying to solve performance problems, getting better with consistency, and consistently doing the things well that we know we need to do well, and overcoming known pain points. And it feels really efficient to quickly explain the point I'm trying to make again for the umpteenth time. That feels like the shortest point between these two, or the shortest distance between these 2 points. They're not doing it. I need them to do it. The shortest distance seems to be, I'll just tell them to do it. But is it really? Is that really the shortest point? And going back to what Bill told me, like if all we need is somebody to tell them stuff, then why do I need you? And this is true even if you're the business owner. We're not there just to hammer a check and make big deposits into our checking account and like live on a boat. It requires other things, right? And it really isn't efficient to quickly explain the point I'm trying to make again for the umpteenth time if they still don't go do it. And I have to deal with the consequences of them not doing it, or somebody in the company has to deal with the consequences of them not doing it, or we lose a customer because they're not doing it. And they have to teach this thing again next week. Like I would not call that efficiency, but it feels like it is. So back to, what actions did I take that are most likely responsible for the change I saw in our team on things like communication or anything else? I'm just using communication as an example. This applies to anything. What took them from skepticism, reluctance to just proactively, actively participating in this thing? Now, obviously, there's many things, which we spend a lot of time talking about here on this podcast. But one of the things I can absolutely point to, and which is not common with leaders I've worked with and for, is actively attempting to diagnose what the employees really get and what they don't get. And there's a couple keys to doing this well. One, I have to remember that I cannot diagnose what they understand when I am doing the talking. It is impossible for me to learn what they know and what they don't know if I am talking and they are not. So even though it feels efficient to explain things again, when I'm explaining, I'm not really learning which parts they know and which parts they don't. Now, this is exceptionally hard, especially in the beginning. We're human, and we typically like to have our ideas expressed more than anyone else's. And this is just a fact of human nature. It's just the way it works. So we have to overcome that. And we know what needs to be done. It feels weird for the quote unquote expert, me, to be asking what the right answer is rather than explaining it. But I'm not just teaching here. This is where I'm deviating from teaching. I'm learning what lessons need to be taught, and then I'll go teach those lessons. Second thing is it is counterproductive for me to try to lead them in a particular answer when my aim is to diagnose what they get, know, and buy into and what they don't. So I'm not going to ask the question and then try to steer them towards something. I'm not going to ask an answer and then give multiple choice answers, possibilities at the end of that. And for some, this is the hardest part of all. So we'll ask a question like, how long is too long for a response from us to a customer inquiry? And that's where the talking should stop. But what we sometimes do is we ask, how long is too long for a response from us to a customer inquiry? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 15 minutes? And sometimes with our voice inflection, even when we're unaware of it, gives the answer away. And we think, woo, I led them to the answer. Now they will remember. But I don't think that's accurate. I don't want them to remember with prompting. I want them to remember to do the thing with no prompting. Therefore, I need to diagnose what they know at an instinctual level, which means they're way more likely to do the thing when it matters, and I'm not there to remind them. So I need to ask a pointed, specific question, and then, here comes the hard part, shut up. Brian, be quiet. How long is too long for a response from us to a customer inquiry? If there's a long pause and the answer doesn't immediately come, then I have to accept that that's where they are. And then it's on me to teach it again and ask again later to see what progress they've made. Okay, I'm going to, the second time, they didn't get the first time. Great. I'm going to teach them again, and then I'll ask them the third time. And for some of us, the hardest part, though, comes with that awkward silence. Like, I'll just come out and tell you the awkward silence has been a good friend of mine. I want to read their body language during the silence. Do they know it? They know the answer, and they're just trying to put it into words? Are they completely stumped? Is it on the tip of their tongue and they're excited to blurt it out when it comes to them? Are they engaged or disengaged and not seeming to believe this really matters? Have they never really thought about this before? How long is too long for us to respond to a customer inquiry? If they've never thought about that before, that's the reality. And I want to know, like intuitively, instinctively, what's their answer? I really want to know this. This is not a gotcha thing. I really want to know because if they intuitively kind of think the same way I do, like, well, let's say 15 minutes. Okay, great. Not much coaching needs to be done there. If their answer is, I don't know, a couple hours, if their answer is a day, and my answer is 15 minutes, I know I've got to do some work to get them on board. And I can't learn that if I'm just standing in front of them talking. I can't learn where the gap is between what I know we need to do and what they believe we need to do. And all of that is fantastic information for me to gain. So I know where to pick up the conversation and how to frame it and teach it in a way that will resonate with them, and then they'll go do it. That's the whole point. So that, in my opinion, is way more helpful than just sitting there telling them we need to respond in 15 minutes until, next time we get an inquiry, we got to respond in 15 minutes. Like, if they don't intuitively believe that to be true, and I don't overcome that, then it's just because the boss said so. Going back to Bill's point, if all we need is somebody to stand in front of the people and tell them, why do I need you, Brian? So this is hard for many reasons, like I've covered before. Awkward silences are called awkward for a reason. It's awkward for all of us to be in a situation where I've taught this before and that didn't work. So I feel awkward, like I failed. And they know they've been taught this before and they aren't remembering the answer. It's awkward for them. Again, so it's called awkward for a reason, right? The word awkward is right in there. And for some of us, this awkward silence is the hard part. Awkward silences are excruciating for some of us. So we don't allow time for them to process or think or recall or comprehend. We just gush out the next talking point or reiterate the thing we told them before countless times, or give options so they can come up with the right answer. And hopefully if I get 3 options, they'll pick the right one. What if they pick the wrong one? And what if they pick the right one, but it's just a lucky guess? Like, these are not wins for me, in my opinion, right? But if it works in like 1, 2, or 3 times or whatever, great. Okay, do that. And if they do it from then on, then awesome. Go with that. But if not, then I need to accept that using that methodology is just not going to work in this situation. So to wrap this thing up, a few things I want to be clear on. One, I'm not interested in ensnaring my employees in gotcha moments. That is not why I want to allow the awkward silence. Now, I've worked for some people who did enjoy that. I'm not one of them. It's strictly a diagnosis tool for me. I want to know what they believe, what they think, what they know, and then figure out like how far off is that from what I need them to do and what the customer needs them to do and what the company needs us to do. And I got to bridge that gap. I can't identify the gap to bridge if I'm talking. I can't identify where they think they get it and they really don't if I'm talking. I can't identify when they're just nodding and smiling to get out of this meeting because they'd rather be anywhere but in another meeting if I'm talking. So it's strictly a diagnosis and information gathering tool. And the other thing is I want them to really think about this stuff. Not just nod and smile at the appropriate times as I drone on about the same topic we covered 73 times before. Again, my aim is for them to fully comprehend and understand, which oftentimes can't be rushed, even when it feels like rushing through this thing. Okay, I got a 30-minute meeting. I got 7 topics to cover. I'm going to allot 3 minutes and 47 seconds to this topic on communication. I'm going to reiterate how we need this done and we're not doing it and we need to start doing it. And that feels really efficient because I crammed a whole bunch of stuff into one short meeting and then they don't go do it. And then it's not efficient. So I want them to have a fluency level understanding. And to see if they do, I have to know if they can speak the language of this particular issue. The only way to truly know if a person knows Spanish is to let them speak Spanish. Me just asking them, do you speak Spanish? And them saying yes, does not prove a thing. And the same thing applies here. Them saying they know the thing doesn't mean they know the thing if their answer is like, well, yeah, of course I know that. What would tell me they really know this is they can speak the whole thing through, what we're trying to accomplish, why it matters, how we do it. And that's what I need. They need to have that whole sequence they need to understand if I want them to truly do this autonomously without me having to micromanage the whole thing. So if you're wondering, yeah, this sounds like something you're great at, Brian, but I'm not. I promise you, I was not born with this skill, just like you. It was hard for me in the beginning to ask a question, stop. I wanted to carry on. I want to make my next point. I didn't like the awkward silence. I want to give multiple choice answers. All you need is reps. Ask the question you need to ask, and then force yourself to allow them to answer, even if it takes 12 seconds or 30 seconds. The awkward silence is okay. The awkward silence is telling us information. Them not really knowing the answer, while frustrating at times, is an answer. Do you know this? And that is more helpful and more beneficial in the long run than them saying they know the thing and not really knowing the thing, or thinking they know the thing and being completely wrong. Those things, fixing those mistakes over and over again, dealing with the consequences, the repetitive conversations, that is wildly inefficient, in my opinion. So this is one of my favorite ways to help, again, just diagnose where do they get it, where don't they, and I speak to the things that they don't. I congratulate them, acknowledge that the ones they got, awesome. I coach them up on the ones that are kind of close. Yeah, you're pretty close, but here's a little more what we were thinking. Awesome. If they don't know, then I got to teach them. Right? So again, this is not something that I'm looking for. I'm not looking to create awkwardness, but I don't know of any other way to actually find out what they know and what they don't know than asking a question and stop. Let the silence happen. Let them think it through. I want to watch how they do that. How are they thinking this through? Is it clear like this is the first time they've really ever considered this? Or they know and they're just trying to remember and think it through, like whatever it is. I need to know so I can pick up the conversation at the right place to get the results we all need to be successful. So I hope this helps. Don't forget, go to joinbusinesstips.com to check out all the benefits included in my group called Business Tips. That's tactics and immediate problem solving. We meet twice a month on a recorded Zoom call. You can ask any question you have about improving your business, your growth, your team, your processes, your profitability. Just go to joinbusinesstips.com to see what it's all about. Less than $100 a month, no contracts, no commitment. That's joinbusinesstips.com. As always, if you find the information I share helpful, please share this podcast with a friend or colleague you think could benefit. This episode particularly, lots of folks could benefit from this because it's something that we're not intuitively going to do. It feels counterintuitive and it's very, very, very effective, at least in my experience. Of course, public sharing is also appreciated. That's it for this week, and I'll talk to you all next week.